Now, is it starting?
If I didn't remind you, it wouldn't even have got done.
You're right. Now it's recording.
Oh my God, that is awful. Paul. Can I just say this, dude? I lost Twitter followers today because I called out Trump on the Twitter.
Oh, what did he? I don't know what he did today.
He tweeted out that we should think about canceling the election.
Oh, that's funny.
Voter fraud, mail-in voter fraud, which is widespread.
You know he's trolling people.
He's trolling people. You know what, dude? There's some things like like for me, for instance, right? Like, because I don't dislike Trump, I don't love Trump, I don't love any politician, but I see that, and here's the thing with the voter fraud. That's something he brings up, but they brought it up a lot before he even got there. Yeah. And both sides do it. Let's be real. One side screams and yells, "Oh my God, suppression," and the other side says voter fraud, and neither of them are right.
Well, no, lots of manipulation is going on. But you know that whole ballot harvesting thing, that's voter fraud.
Yeah, but who got hammered the most?
The Republicans.
Republicans, right? So of all the people. And by the way, when it comes to voter fraud mail-in, the Heritage Foundation, 250 mail-in ballots over 20 years.
But did you know they just got caught multiple times now? Those guys got caught. There was 3 of them doing voter fraud, the Democrats, and I forgot what state it was. Then there was another one where they lost like 100,000.
No system is perfect. Even people voting in person, it's not perfect. But this is what the Heritage Foundation. Which way do they lean, dude? This is
they lean very left. I mean, right, but
they said you're 5 times more likely to be struck by lightning than to find voter fraud, a mail-in voter fraud.
But they're only doing past history. Did they do it for
that is such crap, dude. That's all we have, dude, is the data from behind.
Yeah, but you also have to look forward. You could look what they're trying to do in different states.
All we have is the data from behind. You don't have the data. You can't look forward and say, okay, now I predict there's going to be 12 million lies. You cross that bridge when you get there. The only thing we have is
you got to look what they did last election with the voter ballot harvesting. You got.
But is ballot harvesting illegal?
It's not illegal, but it is.
Is it illegal?
It should be.
It should be, but is it?
They're literally going to like shut-ins and stuff.
I get that, but is it illegal?
Well, the legality doesn't make it morally right.
I love you.
It doesn't make it morally right. It's a wrong way.
Look, I'm not here to talk morals. I'm just talking, is it legal or not?
It's legal, but they're abusing people that they shouldn't be abusing.
Yeah, but you know what? The Republicans got caught, and that dude got caught freaking, the GOP. You know when this is when I talk about like the bullshit when it comes to what goes on in the ballot harvesting, or if there is any fraud in voting. It's always local tiny elections where 50 people can swing an election or 150 people can maybe put something. The reality is like Trump's whole thought process, but it's Republicans long before even Trump got there, is this fraud, it's fraud. I have no problem with an ID, right? Because I think if you tell people it's too hard to get an ID, I bet you if I told you there's $300 waiting somewhere, you figure out a way to go and get it.
There's no way it's too hard. You know what? I saw a video on that too, where they were like, "Oh, it's too hard because minorities can't get IDs." And they went into like a minority neighborhood and they asked, "Do you have an ID?" Everybody has an ID.
Of course, in some states you have to have an ID.
You have to have an ID. So the Democrats want to have it both ways. They want to make it easier for them to cheat. And I believe that the local elections are dry runs. So that's my thing. They're really easier to make it cheat. And they also want to make it easier by saying, look, an illegal can mail in a ballot. Because you don't need an ID.
This is the way I look at ID. If I have to give an ID when I buy cough syrup, because for whatever reason you think that I'm going to do something illegal with it, like go out and start some sort of meth thing, then you should have to give an ID to at least register to vote and stuff like that. But here's what they said, right? So this is the Heritage Foundation, 20-year span, 50 states. There was 1,100 criminal convictions over the past 20 years, but only 204 were involved in fraudulent use of absentee ballots and 143 convicted criminal convictions. So over 20 years, 8 cases per year, or 3 cases per state. You're 5 times less likely to get hit by lightning in the United States than.
But don't you think that that's a post or pre-Trump world? And in this world where people are unhinged over Trump, like they'll literally like sit in the middle of the streets just screaming at the top of their lungs. The idea that they would be desperate enough to try and cheat seems much more likely than in the world where it was like, either Reagan or Dukakis. They're probably not going to cheat on that.
Well, no, because you're going to get your ass kicked, dude.
That's now we've got a polarized.
Here's the thing. This is, look, does it happen? Yes. Does it happen on the scale that people want you to believe? The answer to that question is a giant negative, Ghost Rider.
But you know what? I don't think this is the time when the world's this polarized that we should test that out. We have been going to our polls, not mailing them in like lazy people, going to a poll and voting since George Washington.
Dude,
now,
I mail my ballot in.
They want to change it all?
I mail my ballot in.
I mail my ballot in. My dad mails my ballot in. But for the most people, the majority of people go to the polls.
You can't. I mail my ballot. Some states, that's only mail-in ballot.
If it's always been that way, it's always been that way. Why is the desperate need to change it all of a sudden? If you don't
I don't think it's a desperate need. I think it's. They're not saying. Here's the thing. Nobody's saying it's only mail-in ballots. You're going to still be able to go and vote. But what he's saying,
expanding it. And the question is why? Why do you want to expand it all of a sudden?
Nobody wants to go to the freaking polls, for God's sakes, dude. My God, if we could vote by app, we would.
Because we're lazy. But
because we're lazy.
That was the thing. They're scared that they're not going to get turnout, and they know they can ballot harvest these vote-in mails. They can
make ballot harvesting illegal, which I'm totally fine with, but we're not there yet. So make it illegal, and we're not there yet.
Then that's fine. Make it illegal, and then open it up to vote in, and we'll do this all.
The choice. That's all I want is a choice.
We'll do it all next election cycle when we can have had time to figure out all these things.
All I want is a choice. But here's the thing. According to the Constitution, first of all, Trump has no power to move the election. 0. Like, of all the power he's got, 0 is kind of it. Because you need Congress. And it's like basically getting an act of war, kind of like. But secondly, if he tries to delay, or there is a delay, on January 20th, if there is no president, based on the Constitution, the Speaker of the House will be President of the United States until there is a finished vote.
Nothing's delayed. He's making a point.
I know
everything Trump does.
But here's the thing, though, Paul. If Obama would have said this, people on the right, who still to this day swear to God we're all under Sharia law, and he was going to take our guns, and he was never going to leave the freaking White House. And I've always said, dude, Trump will walk out of the White House on that day, probably gladly doing it as well, because I don't know why anybody would want that stupid.
Dude, you realize for some reason leftist conspiracy theory is somehow, they act as if it's more legitimate. Trump's not going to leave. We're going to have to force him out. That's a conspiracy theory for crazies. There is no evidence that if Trump lost an election,
it was just like the Trump. It was just like the Obama thing. I used to laugh and I was like, dude, he's not taking any of your guns. In fact, he's been your greatest gun salesman, right?
He killed more people than anybody else.
Oh my God, yeah. He was like, he came in. We were in a couple wars. He left. We were in like 7.
Obama was not a bad president.
No.
So that'll probably lose a lot. But Obama was not a bad president. He did things I didn't like. But overall, I thought he was a pretty good president. Trump is not a bad president. He does things I don't like, but overall, our economy's been doing good. Blah, blah. I think he's been a good president.
Yeah. I don't love anybody. I thought Obama was pretty damn good. I think Trump has done some really good stuff. I think he's done some other stuff that he's.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. There's stuff I'm like, oh, why did you do that? But then there's stuff you're like, yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
And it's the insanity right now of you either have to love every little thing he does, or you have to vilify everything he does.
Yeah, well, that's
crazy,
and that's the insanity. And you know what? The extremes that we live in, which is crazy. It's no fun. And in fact, I was talking today. The biggest story in the world should be the fact that the Department of Homeland Security, the Pentagon and the Navy are going to be releasing some stuff about UFOs and things like this. And in one of the things it says, we have a vehicle that is not of this earth.
Do you know how mind-blowing that is?
It should be the biggest story in the whole wide world. We
And
shouldn't be talking
it's a
about
Trump
anything
tweet.
else.
That's why we're a crazy society.
Yeah.
A Trump
I
tweet
said
becomes the biggest story in the world, and you're like, no, aliens exist.
I
We were
said,
told aliens exist.
this isn't a rock.
No.
This isn't some sort of weird gelatinous thing that
It's
has
not a worm. It's not something like there's a worm on Mars.
This is a craft, not of this world. And I said the only way that anybody will cover that is if Trump comes out and says we're not going to let them vote.
Or if Trump says, I invite anybody from all this world, they're like, we have to build a wall from in space. We cannot let aliens come and talk to Trump.
I spoke to the aliens, and they all are registered Republicans now.
Like, we must build giant space walls.
You know what's crazy, though? That Dr. Emanuel, who's like, you watch some of her stuff, and she's a bit out there, to say the least, But I was sitting there going, wow, it's kind of makes you think that maybe she's right a little bit.
Exactly. No, seriously, when all those crazy people we've listened to, from the guy from Area 51, I forgot, Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar.
You're like, oh, you're crazy. And all of a sudden the Pentagon, well, yeah, we kind of have a craft. You're like, he said I worked on alien craft. He had this whole story about Area 51, and he worked on captured craft. And you're like, yeah, dude, whatever.
His story is very interesting because, like, the whole Lazar thing is, they tried to, he never worked here. Did he work here? No, we never even heard of the guy. Well, maybe we did. And then, and it's so believable because of the way that he talks about the fact that it's like, I only got to see what I got to work on.
Which would make sense.
Yeah. He goes, and we weren't allowed to know really the other guys. They weren't allowed to know us. We're only working on this thing. And then we pass it to somebody else who then goes and he'll draw the puzzle together. And that way, so you have all this plausible deniability. And just watching him talk about it, you're like, yeah, that guy's not lying. He's not lying. That guy's telling the truth.
The weird stuff. Like, it was one of the, like a Defense Department person in Canada. Canada Defense Department.
Yes, the guy in Canada who said that we've got aliens inside the government.
And but see, this is why the problem is going to be, he called them the tall whites. Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's totally not correct. You can't.
We're going to probably be like, how dare aliens not be a different color?
We demand
how dare aliens be white?
Where's your diversity?
Where's your diversity, aliens? Where's the green aliens I've been told about?
So, but it was just for, like, this should be the biggest story in the world. We shouldn't even be close to talking about anything else. And the biggest story in the world should be that they're kind of admitting that, yeah, we got a spacecraft and it's not of this world. Then it should be the coronavirus and the economy and the fact that we contracted 33%, which is the biggest in the history of freaking the history. And then we could talk about some of the other stuff that's going on. But it's like, unless Trump, I remember Dennis Miller said this, it's about the insanity of when only people will care. He said, when Muslims don't care about the moon? He said, when Jews go there.
Yeah, exactly. We're like, we were there first.
And so it's the same thing. People don't care about this because my thought process the entire time on Donald Trump was, if there was any president you can never tell that there's aliens, it's Trump. Because the minute he got sworn in, he was going to turn and says, where are the aliens? Because I'm tweeting it out.
Well, you realize, did you see there was an interview where he touched on it. He touched on aliens and he said something like, there's some really interesting stuff. And then he stopped himself.
Yeah.
He knows. He's the president. He knows. He's the president. Like, he's not the president, resist. No, he's the president. So he knows things. So he knows probably more than he's let on. And now as it's coming out, there's going to be a Twitter storm the second that the Pentagon announces something.
Yeah.
Trump's going to be like, and I knew this from the beginning. The alien's named Bob. We've had lunch.
I wasn't allowed to say anything because they said I was going to take away all my stuff. So they were like,
but he said I was the greatest president you've had lunch with.
Like this was like, if I say something, they're going to destroy me. It's going to be awful. It's going to be crazy. I just can't. No, not
But Trump will have created a trade deal with him. And all of a sudden,
we're going to send the people that are useless up there, and they're going to mine gold for them.
Exactly.
Right? And then it's going to be
cool NAFTA trade deal with aliens.
It's a it is a galaxy trade deal.
And all of a sudden, our economy busts back again.
You know what's going to be cool? They're going to tell us that. I won't tell you guys this, but Steve Jobs was an alien.
Yeah, they're going to start telling this. There's so
Tall
many
white,
crazy
tall white,
conspiracy
tall
theories.
white.
Tall whites, exactly. Tall whites. I love that. But there's a huge history behind this concept of remember in the 60s movement when the Noradics, they were
Yeah.
always talking about aliens were Nordic looking people. All those crazy people might be validated. All those people that we looked at and they were wearing like Indian chief headdresses and stuff, talking about being abducted and taken to Uranus and stuff by a bunch of like blonde guys. And you're like, okay, dude, whatever. What if they're validated?
What if they are?
That would
What
be
if they are?
insane to me. And I love listening. I love UFO subjects. So I used to read all that kind of crap and read all the old 60s were the best time for UFOs. They weren't little gray aliens with big eyes. They were just everything from a Bigfoot looking creature to dwarfs to guys that look like they should be like surfers in Huntington Beach or something. And you're like, that was the beautiful time for UFOs.
It's totally crazy. It is. It's just, again, that should be the biggest story, and the story is not. I mean, and it's something else, like we talked about, like John Lewis is being laid to rest today, who is a Democrat. But I try to explain people. I said, here's my sad thing about John Lewis. First of all, I always thought, man, don't get into politics because your legacy is going to be destroyed. Because politics is awful. But the reality is, everybody on both sides of the aisle loved the guy. And then Herman Cain died today. Again, two guys separated by just a few years who grew up in trying times.
Yep.
One who went out and built something from nothing in Herman Cain, and the other one who went out and was a part of a movement that was so huge, that was earth-shattering in the modern world. And it's just, you sit there and we talk about race and the battle in this country and the insanity in this country that we go through at times because we're so divided, we shouldn't be. The reality is in so many ways, two guys, one who died today and one who died last week, were giants in this world. And both of them were African American, and both of them did amazing things. And yeah, we got our problems. We're struggling at times, but that is pretty awesome.
It is, and you know what? People too much don't look at the history of a person. They look at like you said, like the guy had politics, and that's going to ruin his legacy. No, his legacy stands.
Absolutely.
He did some amazing stuff. It doesn't matter what you do at the end of the day.
He was a freedom rider. He was the freedom rider. He led the march on Bloody Sunday or Sunday.
People
Bloody
look like that because look at people look like this unless they want to cancel you. Then they'll look at 10-year-old tweets. But other than that, they will literally look at this much of your life and judge.
It's myopic.
And it's absolutely bizarre. Even when it comes to any of it, you have a Herman Cain or something, because he became political, they're going to try and sully his legacy. No, these people did. Who's the guy? Ben Carson.
Yes.
They hate Ben Carson now. They try and sully his legacy. Dude, that guy was incredible. He did, all kinds of incredible things about his career. The idea that just because now he has a conservative politics that he's somehow a moron is unbelievable to me. He says some crazy things, but that's not the point. The point is, he has a long legacy of being incredibly impressive and working hard and achieving stuff. That's who he is. Just because we all have crazy ideas. I mean, we just talked about aliens. If we just went into deep on our alien ideas.
If we went deep, like we're stoked. Like, oh my God, you and I are running at it. What's up? And they're like, people are like, you guys are nuts.
You guys are nuts. But there's more to us than a few ideas. It's the totality of who we are.
Yeah. And we don't look at that. And that's the sad thing about like where we are right now and the cancel culture. And we don't look at a broader look at
culture is horrible. It's 1984. It is literally the novel, not the year. But it's I don't like what you say, so you can't say it.
Yeah, that's insane.
It's literally insane. And the fact that they're going and digging up like tweets from like a decade ago or something crazy, you're like, dude, you're not holding me to a standard that you just invented, by the way.
Yeah.
You just invented in saying that I'm no longer allowed to be in public because I don't hold to your tiny little box of a standard. That's ridiculous. What
I love is when they go get woke and they're talking about how bad all these people were back in the past, back in the 1800s and the 1600s and the 1700s. And you go and you look and you think to yourself, and they have some sort of ideal, like if I was around back then, I would be just as woke as I am now. And my answer to that question would be bullshit. You would not be woke at all. You would be part of what is the sign of the time of that day. That's it. Now maybe you would be a little bit more progressive. Where like, well, maybe we shouldn't do this or that. But to say that you were going to be as woke, you're full of it. Hell, they'd have probably called you a witch.
Yeah, but they wouldn't. You're 100% wouldn't. You would be walking down the street and you could buy a slave because they're always like George Washington had slaves. This guy had slaves. Everybody had slaves back then. Like if you had money, you had slaves. The idea that we have to get rid of George Washington because he owned slaves is insane.
It is.
It's insane because that used to be a time where, and remember, George Washington wanted to get rid of all his slaves and he freed them all when he died. I really think it's the only reason he kept them is because his wife didn't want to cook or clean or do anything. Look at that.
Martha was just
she didn't
ladies,
do anything.
lady. But you know, it's when you look back on it, if you would have said, well, you're taking your ideals and you're putting them back there. Well, why don't we flip the script? What if we brought George Washington ahead? What would he be like based in today's world? Because if you're going to say that you would be as woke or that's how you're going to judge people, maybe you should say, well, hold on a second. I'm going to bring people forward and let's see if in the forward world, would they be as bad then? Well, George Washington be walking around with a powdered wig and say to themselves, oh man, I'll keep my slaves because Martha doesn't want to cook.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No, and look at their writings. Look at how they wanted to change the world, but they knew the world they were in.
Yeah.
So they understood what they were dealing with, and they were creating something in documents and a constitution and documents that would say, look, we're putting in the groundwork for a better world. We couldn't, we're all created equal, all this stuff. We, the people act like, well, this isn't true because they didn't act like that at the time. They knew that. They were creating a document that would outlive them and was a goal for us to reach, not something that had to exist at that moment because they knew it wouldn't be possible. Yeah. They knew that, they just
because the whole thing it was about tomorrow and tomorrow's tomorrow and the future and outliving them. And 100%. Can I bring something to this world that is going to be a legacy, but it's going to allow? They had to have known that one day freedom was going to come. One day these things were going to change. They wanted it. Yeah.
Look at their writings. They wanted freedom to come. They wanted the Constitution to be enacted for all people. Knowing that in the future, and that's why the government set up it was, in the future, people would be able to vote, we'd have a representational government, and things will change because they knew that the population is going to morph over time and that we're going to have more equality, everything. Founding fathers were brilliant because they didn't live in their time. They lived in the time they thought could happen.
Yeah.
And that was amazing.
Again, we judge them on today's sensibilities, but we never once say to ourselves, if they were here, what would their sensibilities be?
Yeah.
Because they would have grown up in a world where it would have been much different. And they lived in the world that they lived in, but they sought a future and wanted that future to grow. And
put in the tools for it.
Absolutely. They give us a roadmap to success.
Exactly. So like they wanted to replace Mount Rushmore, for example, because there's slaveholders on there. Ridiculous. There's people that lived in their time and created the tools for us to make a better society. If our society's not better, it's not their fault. They should be on Mount Rushmore. They gave us all the tools and said, here you go, guys. And we're just like, making tostadas out of everything instead of actually creating a society that we want.
So the last thing that we're going to touch on today is those crazy doctors. Not all of them are crazy. Let's be real. Emmanuel is she's an acquired taste of lunacy, and she's Alex Jones' dream. And he's like, that's what I've been telling people for years. There's lizard people, and this is real. Jade Helmet's going to happen. There's martial law and lizard people. But I think his name was it Roish or Hirsch, who was the Yale epidemiologist. Yep. When you read what he writes, he said, look, you're absolutely right. This stuff, the way that they've used hydrochloroquine, will not work because you're giving it to them too late. You have to give it to them within 5 days of them testing positive to get the results that you need. That was what his argument. The problem was when I watched some of that was too often people said cure. We have a cure. Yeah. And that's where they went wrong. You can't go around saying, we got a cure, we got a cure, we got a cure. And that was the issue. I mean, this amongst other parts of some of the crazies. And also, the doctors, some of them with good hearts wanting to come out and talk about some of the stuff. Also, you got to look who you're funded by and, who's putting a lot of this stuff out there. Because sometimes some of this PAC money and shadow money, it's for their own design. But he makes points that are very valid, which is, look, this is affordable. It's safe to use, but it's got to be used at a specific time. And there's also a doctor in Brawley, California, not too far from you, who makes the same argument that he makes. You've got to give it to him at a specific time, within 5 to 7 days of contracting it when you have a positive test. Because if you don't do that, then pretty much it's a hit and hope.
Well, it's bizarre that people aren't willing to listen to doctors that aren't credible. Even listen to doctors that aren't credible that have experience doing it. That's weird to me. Even if you were a crazy doctor, but you have experience and you said, this is my results because I've been doing this. Why wouldn't you listen to them and try it? Why would you immediately put up, like, they've banned the video? They're banning people that online. They're trying to scrub the internet of that video. That makes no sense to me.
No. But they use the word cure. You can't use the word cure in something like that. You can't say that word because there's not a cure for it, but there may be a treatment for it.
It's because we are children in their eyes. Yeah. They must protect us because we don't have the ability to parse the data ourselves and say, maybe it's not a cure. Maybe this person, thinks alien DNA is in our bloodstreams and it's not a cure. But what if it could be a treatment? But of course, they know better because we're all stupid. They must protect us from a video that says a word that they think we're too stupid to understand, I guess. It's a cure.
You know what makes me laugh, though, is that you said it's we're too stupid. We're not. Most of the people who are going to watch this, not. But there are some people out there that struggle with day-to-day life, and you do wonder that they've made it as long as they have. And all of us have had friends and know people that you're like, dude, borrowed time. This is what Darwin was talking about.
No one can just go out and buy this drug. A doctor has to administer it.
Yeah.
So even if you misinterpret it and you go, it's a cure, I need it now, when you go to your doctor, he'll explain it to you.
We just had people here in Arizona a couple weeks ago that drank hand sanitizer, but it wasn't like 1 or 2, it was like 40 people. And I don't know if they were having a good time, if it was a freaking Tide Pod Challenge Part 2, but some of them died. And I thought to myself, if you're the 38th person and you see people vomiting and dying around you, would you think to yourself in a moment of clarity, you know what, I think I'm going to hold on to this beer.
Exactly. Well, you know what? You're right. What was that experiment where people don't like to go against the crowd? If they see, and they did it's experiments, it's really interesting. Even if you see the right answer, you know the right answer. It's like what number's on the screen? Well, it's a 2, but everybody in the crowd says 3. A lot of people will go, I guess it's a 3, because they don't want to be the outlier. They don't want to be the guy that's outside of the group. And you see that happening in all kinds of stuff now, even in that kind of stuff. You see it happening where, well, I guess it's a cure, even though they're sick, because the group around them are saying it.
But I just always think we should have all the information we can, even if it's false. And if you can't decipher from false, then maybe that's on you to do more. And the problem is we don't want to do more. Like I said, we were talking about it earlier, even with voting, man, if we could vote with an app, if there's going to be a civil war, it's going to have to be on an app, because the reality is most people aren't getting off the couch to do anything that really, really puts them out.
To me, my belief is it's manufactured. And I think tech companies are helping to manufacture this, and social media companies. They want us to be lazy-brained. They want us to think that we don't have to think for ourselves. We're going to be told exactly the truth. This is why I'm getting rid of this video, because what if it sparked you to think for yourself?
Yeah.
Don't think through it. Don't analyze what they have to say. Just believe it immediately. We need to stop that. But that's what cancel culture does, everything. They don't want us to be able to think. They don't want to get extra data that comes in your mind and sparks ideas. That's horrible, because those ideas might go against their little agenda. And they hate that idea.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, I think there is a COVID agenda. I think there's something out there that's trying to keep us all panicked. Because if you say glimmers of hope and you say, look, there's a pretty cheap drug that actually can help you, that's a huge glimmer of hope. But they don't want that out.
By the way, I don't know if it's going to help you. I always tell everybody, go to your doctor. I don't know, because it may help 5 people and it may damage 5 people.
We're not doctors.
Doctor call. And that's what you should do in all things. But, this is also a generation in the world we live in now where they have to put stuff on like freaking, soda bottles and say, do not eat the cap. Like that should be the first thing like, I'm not going to eat that because that doesn't look like something a human being should suggest. But that's what we do. Like jumping off a building may cause harm. Like, do I really need that? Like, is that something that you need to push somewhere? But yes, apparently we are still a species that we're devolving and
we're devolving because we used to not be. We used to be much more intelligent as a whole. We really did. And then somehow they've been dumbing down society where, just think, if you went back into the 30s, you wouldn't need any of this signage. You'd hand a guy a Coke bottle, and he may never seen a Coke bottle, but he knows, I'm just going to drink it.
It's like liquid. I know I'm not going to eat the outside because that looks painful. That's it.
Or he's like, how many of you just accidentally jump off the roof? Nobody. They're like,
how many of you have, I don't know, ate the bottle cap? We've not all done it. Nobody does that.
Nobody. But something happened. And I think that's interesting to me. I love these puzzles of society. Something happened. When it happened, I don't know. It's worth looking into and figuring out, where was that fork in the road? Where was it where we were really individual thinkers that thought through stuff, and then boom, all of a sudden we became just consumers. And not just consumers of product, consumers of ideas.
The growth of crazy, wild education, higher education, I think is a huge part of it. So, well, this has been awesome. We'll do it again. Maybe we'll do it tomorrow. I don't know. It's fun. But you can follow along with us, and we're going to post this right now, and then we'll go from there. So I will talk to you soon, brother.
Sounds good.